Good evening and welcome to Gibson's Bookstore Remote. I am Elizabeth, the events coordinator for Gibson's Bookstore, and I am joined tonight by two authors, Paula Munier and her friend, Hank Phillippi Ryan, as they celebrate tonight the launch and release of Paula's newest book, The Hiding Place, a Mercy Carr Mystery. Paula is the USA Today bestselling author of the Mercy and Elvis Mysteries, A Borrowing of Bones. The first in the series was nominated for the Mary Higgins Clark Award and named the Dogwise Book of the Year. Blind Search was inspired by the real-life rescue of a little boy with autism who got lost in the woods. Paula credits the hero dogs of Mission Canine Rescue, her own rescue dogs, Bear, Bliss, and Blondie, a Malinois mix as smart and loyal as Elvis, who we do see in your background now, and a lifelong passion for crime fiction as her series' major influences. She has also written 3 popular books on writing, Plot Perfect, The Writer's Guide to Beginnings, and Writing with Quiet Hands, as well as Fixing Freddie and Happier Every Day. Hank Phillippi Ryan is the USA Today bestselling author of 12 novels of suspense. She has also won multiple prestigious awards for her crime fiction, including 5 Agathas, 4 Anthonys, and the coveted Mary Higgins Clark Award. She is also the on-air investigative reporter for Boston WHDH-TV and has won 37 Emmys, 14 Edward R. Murrow Awards, and dozens of other honors for her groundbreaking journalism. National book reviews have called Hank a master at crafting suspenseful mysteries and a superb and gifted storyteller. Hank's novels have been named Best Thrillers of the Year by Library Journal, New York Post, BookBub, Pop Sugar, Real Simple Magazine, and others. Her 2019 book is the acclaimed legal thriller The Murder List, which won the Anthony Award for Best Novel of the Year. It was nominated for the Agatha, McCavity, and Mary Higgins Clark Awards. Her newest book is The First to Lie, a chilling psychological standalone. It garnered a starred review from Publishers Weekly and is now nominated for the iconic Mary Higgins Clark Award. And watch for her Perfect Life coming in September. Hank has graciously offered to sign and personalize any copies of, I've already lost the title. The First to Lie, thank you. Any but that are ordered through us. And Paula, of course, has also offered to sign and personalize copies of her new title, The Hiding Place, that we are celebrating here tonight. Thank you so much for the two of you for joining us. Thank you for bringing the dog, Paula. To our attendees at home, if you would like to join our conversation, we will be answering questions that you ask in the chat and Q&A sidebars throughout the event. We will be answering those at the end. Please put those into the chat sidebar. Make sure if you want to have a conversation with the other audience members, make sure your settings are set to all panelists and attendees. With that flight attendant spiel out of the way, over to you, Hank and Paula. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, our seat backs and tray tables are in the full upright position, and we are ready to talk. Very well done. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. It is, Paula, this is great. You need to look at the chat, because if I go like this, I'm looking at the chat, not looking away from you. And Edwin Hill is here, and Joanne Love is here, and Joanna Schaffhausen is here. And so I don't want to read all the names because I'll miss some, but you should look, because this is such an outpouring. Angela Latero Hastings is here from our class, who we took, who turned out to be such a dear friend. And Priya is here. Now somebody's calling you Paula Sue. Uh-oh. Someone says, Guten Abend, Paula Sue. There's a story there.
Well, I'm gonna have to, who's calling?
And Joan Lang is here. Oh my God, this is great, all of you. So Paula, you look at that chat.
I will. Well, Paula Sue, who's calling me Paula Sue? That's really funny, because only people who call me Paula Sue, which is, God help me, my real name, are people who've known me since I was little. Because when I was little, everybody called me Paula Sue until I was 16 and said, okay, enough. But the people who know me well, who've known me all my life, call me Paula Sue. So
this is James Butler. So you all should talk on the chat when we're done. We're now having Old Home Week here at the event. Sarah White is saying, we're now all calling you Paula Sue. And Elizabeth Nichols is saying, plus some unknown Guppy fans too. Yay. I knew I should never have read names. I knew I should never have done that, but you should look at the chat, just suffice it to say. And you know what, this leads me to this. How does it feel? How are you? Congratulations, hooray.
Oh, thank you. No, yes, I got some wine too here. No, we all have these dreams, right? When we're little, that we could grow up to be a ballerina or an astronaut or whatever. And I always wanted to be a writer, but I didn't really say it out loud. And then, at least not, until I was older. And then I woke up this morning and I thought, my third mystery is coming out today. I really am a mystery writer. It was so exciting. I thought, because I think a lot of writers, we all suffer from imposter syndrome from time to time. But I thought 3 mysteries, I can call myself a mystery writer. I really am a mystery writer. That's great. So it was very exciting. It was just as good as being a ballerina or an astronaut,
I mean, it's interesting because everybody in this chat is thinking, well, of course she's a mystery writer. How is it different from when you were a little girl and wanted to be a writer and what you thought about what that was to this morning, which is really a profound realization on your part, because that is a page turning in your life, in your emotions. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't know. I was thinking about it because a lot of times when I'm trying to learn to do something, the first time is always, kind of a disaster. We've got a barker here. This is our Great Pyrenees is a barker. Hey, come on. And the first time you're trying to figure it out, right? So it's a process where you're really trying to figure out what it is you're doing. It doesn't matter if you're, learning to upholster a couch, whatever it happens to be. The second time is usually you've got a little confidence because you think, oh yeah, I did this. I can do it again. And then it's never that easy. The second time is always kind of a disaster. And of course, we've all heard the sophomore book stories, right? About that second novel, how hard it is. And certainly was hard for me. But by the third time, you feel like, okay, now I'm sort of hitting my stride. Third time's a charm. And that this morning, I thought, okay, I've written 3 books. So yeah, I've got that third time's a charm. So I'm good. I'm good. I can actually call myself a mystery writer without feeling like it was just a fluke or luck or, I think we all feel that way sometimes, right?
All the time. I would say 100% all the time. But
Yeah.
Paula, you wrote this book in a pandemic. I mean, this is super pressure, emotionally, spiritually, sort of existentially, forgive me. There's so many levels under which you had to not only do the difficult thing of writing the best book you could possibly write, because you're always leveling up, but to do it in a pandemic, how did that affect you? And I saw in your gorgeous acknowledgments in the book a little bit about that. And I'd love you to talk a little bit about how that affected you.
Well, I think I had started I write very rough first drafts. And I had finished the very rough first draft March 13th last year, which was right before lockdown. And then we went into lockdown and then I had to revise. And revision is really my process, right? I'm all about revision, right? I can fix it. And so I had to do that during the pandemic. And as I'm writing book 4 now, I wish I could remember how I did it, but I had COVID brain and I don't remember writing this book at all or revising it. I think this has been such a weird year where we've suffered kind of a persistent, constant, low-grade fever, right? Or of anxiety and stress and just not knowing, uncertainty, so that I don't remember how I wrote it. Hopefully I can figure it out so I can finish book 4, but it's kind of a blur, right? Somebody said to me, oh, every day is Blur's day. And I think every day is Blur's day, and it has been for me. So I wrote it because I just kept on going. And I'm very thankful I had a first draft because that helped.
But I think that's so interesting when you say you wrote it because you just kept on going. You're an agent and you talk to wacky writers all the time, people who are worried. We all are worried and we're needy and we wonder how to get good and how to get better. And it's easy for a person to tell someone else how to do it. But you're the embodiment of somebody who could tell somebody else how to do it perfectly and then has to face it themselves. And do you think it's a sort of your inner writer just pushing you ahead? What is it that made this work so beautiful? The reviews are astonishing. The reviews are the champagne and dozens of roses. So what do you think worked?
Well, I think part of it was I didn't know I had a 3-book contract, and this was book 3. I didn't know if there was going to be a book 4 at the time. So I wanted it to be acceptable to me, because a lot of times you read a series and then the series is canceled. This is my secret weapon, by the way. If the dogs get too rowdy, if you wonder why she have the squirt bottle, it's just water. Don't panic. Doesn't hurt them, but they don't even want me to do it. They just, all I have to do is hold it up. So anyway, so what we were talking about, I forgot.
How do you think you did it?
Oh yes, how did I do it? I think part of it was I just needed to get on with it. And I think I had a deadline, right? And I knew it was book 3. I didn't know if I had another book coming. So I wanted it to be satisfying to me. So that if this were the last book in the series, I would be happy with where everyone in the series was, right? I wanted it, and because sometimes, you start to read a series and then for some reason the series canceled and it just ends and you don't get to wrap it up. And I liked it. So I thought, I'm going to do it so that if there's no book 4, I'm pleased with the way it turns out, where all the people are, where all my characters are in their lives, right? Because they're real people to me.
Yeah, of course. But I think one of the things that what you're saying really, in a way, which is sort of educational, actually, is that you just put it all out there. If you think this is the last time I'm going to do this, your brain is saying that, which I told you every day was ridiculous, but nevertheless, the last time I'm going to do this, and I'm going to give it everything that I've got. And there's no holds barred. There's no holding back. I mean, is it Anne Lamott who said put everything, or Anne Patchett who said put everything on the page every day? And I bet you did that.
Yes, and I tell my clients that all the time. Especially if they haven't been published yet and they've got a trilogy or something, they'll say, well, I'm saving that for the next book. I always say, no. Go for broke. Go for broke in every book. And you really kind of have to do that. And I really did that in this book. I went broke.
And you realize then that more burbles up. When you think you're using it all up, what you really are is making room for more stuff. Isn't that kind of great?
It is great. And it's fun too,
Well, I know some people have probably heard this, but I love this story because it's also instructive to hear where Mercy and Elvis came from in the first place. Because again, serendipity. Do you mind telling that story? I'm sure that you have so many new fans who are here tonight that may not know this, but it's so instructive.
Well, okay, so I was writing this book called The Writer's Guide to Beginnings for Writer's Digest. And it was based on this first 10 pages boot camp that our agency does with new writers for Writer's Digest. And it was basically saying, here's how you start a book. It's so important to capture the reader's attention and to keep it. It's especially important at the beginning because nobody reads any farther if they aren't interested, right? So I needed a chapter that I could put through various revisions and use for various exercises, an opening chapter. And I had a lot of great beginnings, all the famous beginnings that we know and love that are so fabulous. But I needed one that I could actually work with, right? And put through a number of variations. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to have to write this myself because I can't use anybody else's opening chapter to do this.
You're not going to rewrite Rebecca and show how it should have been done.
Exactly. I couldn't do that. So I thought, well, I just have to write one. And I had just done, along with a lot of our fellow mystery writers here in New England, I had done a fundraiser for Leo Mulroney, who writes fabulous thrillers for Kensington, and his editor, Michael Hamilton. They were doing a fundraiser for Mission Canine Rescue, which is this fabulous organization that rescues military working dogs that have been abandoned. And the Army does an okay job of taking care of dogs once they finish their service. But the defense contractor dogs, once they finish their service, often end up in very bad situations and need rescuing. And I had gone to this fundraiser and I had met all these dog handlers and their working dogs. They had soldiers there and bomb sniffing dogs. They had game wardens there. They had law enforcement there, drug sniffing dogs, illegally procured fish sniffing dogs, you name it, they had it. And I fell in love with all these dogs. And so I thought, okay, I'm gonna write this first chapter. It's not real. I'm just doing it for the book. So I write whatever I want. So I thought, I'll put these dogs in it, and I'll make the heroine a returning veteran, former MP, and I'll set it in Vermont because I love Vermont, and I'll pretend I'm Julia Spencer Fleming with dogs, and I'll just write this first chapter for fun. So I just wrote it for fun, and I threw in everything I loved. And then my agent, the fabulous Gina Panettiere, read the book and said, that first chapter you used as a sample was really great. You should finish that book. And I did. She got me a 3-book deal. It's kind of crazy.
Quite a moment too, because again, you didn't care. It was just, you were going for it, and you were doing it for the readers, and you're doing it for your readers, and because it was kind of fun to see if you could do it.
Right. So, exactly.
After that moment, and Linda saying Gina is great.
Gina is great.
After that moment when you thought, oh, now this is going to be real, how did you decide on Mercy, and how did you decide on Elvis, and how did you decide on how, the story of how they met, and how this book would grow and populate?
Well, Mercy, I decided on, I come from a military family. My friend James Butler, who calls me Paula Sue, we were Army brats together. Oh. And in the 7th grade, he would save a seat for me on the bus in Baumholder, Germany, where we lived on an Army base on the top of a mountain, right? So I grew up in the military, and I have a very soft spot in my heart for the men and women who serve. And so I always thought, had I been born later, because they accepted women into West Point a year after I graduated from high school, thank the Lord. Otherwise, the pressure would have been on. But I missed that. But I always think about it, because a lot of my male counterparts at my age, were expected to choose an academy and go, right? And James went to the Naval Academy. He's a very well-honored naval officer. So I didn't do that, right? But if I'd been born 10 years later, I probably might have. And so I think about that, and I think about the life not taken, right? The life not lived, the path not taken. And so I think that's what writers do, right? We think about, ooh, what if we had taken that path? And what would that look like? And what would I be like if I were, all those years younger and a military MP? What would that look like? And I think that's where the germ of it came from. And then Elvis came from the working dogs that I met. He was sort of a composite. And at this fundraiser, I sat at this table with this state trooper from Massachusetts. And he had a Malinois that he was in training, like Elvis, in training to be a drug sniffing dog. And I said, well, where's your dog? Because all the other handlers had their dogs, and I met a lot of them, right? And he said, oh, she's not ready for prime time yet. And I thought, ooh, there's the dog I want to put in my book. The one that's not quite ready for prime time, because she was still a puppy and she was still learning. And Elvis is all grown up, but I knew that as a puppy, he would have been the dog that wasn't quite ready for prime time. And now, of course, we have Blondie, our Malinois mixed rescue, who is not quite ready for prime time. So
she's trying for it tonight, trying for it tonight.
Exactly.
Mercy, did the name Mercy, which is so sweet and so poignant, did you have to think through names to come up with Mercy Carr, or how did you do that?
Well, there's a long history in New England of virtue names. And I wanted a virtue name because I've always loved virtue names. I think if I'd been older when I had my children, they would have all gotten virtue names. I'm sure they're very glad they were born when they were, so they didn't get those names. But I've always loved virtue names. And there's a fabulous song called Mercy Now by Mary Gauthier that I love. And I just think mercy is a lovely concept. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, Mercy's perfect. I'm going to pick Mercy. And then when we moved to New England, we found out that unbeknownst to us, we had a long lineage of New England settlers that we didn't know about. And Carr was one of their names, and they came from New Hampshire. So I picked Carr because it was an old family name. So that's how we got Mercy Carr.
I mean, it just clicks together, doesn't it, when it works? I mean, every writer knows this. And how about Elvis for a name? It's so great.
Well, it's so funny because so many people have one person actually said to me, well, that's your dogs have ridiculous names in their books. And I thought, really? I don't think so at all. First of all, these military working dogs tend to have names that are either sort of fierce, like Baron or Spike, or that kind of thing, or they have names like Elvis and Cash and Garth, after sort of rock and country singers. So I thought Elvis was perfect. So
it is perfect, and it has a lot of attitude. It definitely has a lot of attitude. So then you had to construct, and this is the through line through every story. So it's telling a little bit about all the books at once. How Elvis and Mercy met, which again, this poignancy note goes through your entire series and continues. Tell how they met.
Well, Mercy was in Afghanistan. She was an MP, and her fiance Martinez was Elvis's handler. And in a battle in Afghanistan, Martinez was killed, Mercy was wounded, and Elvis was traumatized. And the last thing that Martinez said to her, knowing that Elvis was a defense contractor dog and may not be well taken care of after he'd gone, he said, "Take care of my dog." So she knew that it was her job to take care of Elvis. So she had to find him when she came back, because he disappeared into one of these terrible situations. She had to find him and bring him back to Vermont. And in the first book, we meet them as they're both sort of marching off their grief through the wilderness of Vermont, because they both lost their man and their mission.
So they're recovering together and bonding together. And in this book, in The Hiding Place, I don't want to give away too much, but again, like so much in Mercy's life, that relationship is threatened. Now was that tough to write, if you can tell it without any spoilers?
Well, it was tough to write, but it was all based on research that I had done and stories I had heard about military working dogs who come back, and sometimes they're rescued, sometimes they're rescued and then one of the former handlers comes along and says, "I want this dog." So there have been conflicts like this. And so I thought to myself, what if that happened to Mercy? What would happen? And so that's the emotional story of their through line in the book, Mercy and Elvis.
And it's emotional throughout. There's a lot of, let's talk about the dogs for a second before we get to that. So you were talking about the research that you did about working dogs and about search and rescue dogs, because of the other dog in the book, Susie Bear, and the game warden, Troy. How did you decide to make Mercy and Elvis and Troy and Susie Bear, this balance, this juxtaposition, this man and dog, woman and dog, dog and dog, man and woman? It's so nice and symmetrical. How did you decide to do that?
Well, we had just rescued Bear, our own rescue, who is a Newfoundland Retriever mix, just like Susie Bear. And he is the happiest dog in the world. That's what the vet always calls him, the happiest dog in the world. He's just the loveliest, friendliest dog. And so Susie Bear is really based on Bear. As far as the game wardens go, I just love game wardens. And I love everything about game wardens. I love everything about the work that they do and how seriously they take both, especially the part about protecting our wildlife for future generations and the flora and fauna of New England. So I love them. I've met several game wardens and their dogs, especially Rob Sterling, Vermont game warden, and his dog. He has lots of dogs. The last one I think is Coco, but he's wonderful. And then there's a wonderful woman who runs the New England Search and Rescue Volunteer Group. And these are people who volunteer with there's a standard poodle, there's, retrievers, there's all kinds of dogs. And they're handlers who can be doctors, or they're just, lay people. They train for 2 years so that when someone gets lost in the woods, they go out and help, because, New England is a very big, so much of New England is remote wilderness, and they don't have enough volunteers when someone gets lost, and they don't have enough dogs. So I met and talked to this woman and talked to her about her organization and the volunteers. And so I drew all that from that.
It's so fascinating to read in the book, because all of this is so revealed so beautifully in the book throughout. And you're so perfect at describing not only people's relationships with their animals, but other people's relationships with their animals and how people deal with animals, and how the dogs behave. And even how the cats behave, but how the dogs behave, with their attitude and their who they obey. Is that from research, from experience, from imagination?
Well, I grew up with dogs. My dad had dogs.
Wow.
And he had, he had Weimaraners and Vizslas, and he raised Great Danes for a while. I once spent a New Year's Eve with Dad delivering 11 Great Dane puppies, helping, you don't have to do much. Those dogs do it all. But it made me feel kind of bad. I thought, this dog has just given birth to 11 puppies, not even a whimper, very, very impressive. But so I grew up with dogs, and my dad was, if you need somebody to train your dog, my dad could do it, right? So I grew up with that Colonel training dog guy. And so I knew a lot about dogs, and I'd had a lot of dogs. And then, of course, I just learned more. I talked to so many dog people and so many dog trainers. And we took Bear. When we got Bear, we took him to Mike McCurtain. He's a great guy. And he trains dogs, and he also not just trained Bear, but he trains drug sniffing dogs and law enforcement dogs. So I just talk to people, I was a reporter years ago, and I started off that way. And so I just like talking to people and finding out and meeting the dogs and seeing them in action.
You've always loved dogs, but did it change your relationship with the brain of a dog when you were looking at it in a sort of clinical way?
Well, I understand better now why they're so good at what they do. And the best part about writing the books is that I've gotten to explore all the various ways that dogs help us. There's so many different ways, so many different kinds of service dogs. Now they're even training dogs to detect COVID. They can train dogs because of their fabulous noses. They can train dogs to do practically anything, to find practically anything. And that's very useful in a mystery.
True. It feels like a dog wants to help, wants to give you what you want, wants to please you.
Yes. Well, we've evolved with dogs, and they've evolved with us, and they've evolved, with the intention of pleasing us because it works for them,
They trained us, right?
Yes, absolutely.
When you were talking earlier about Vermont and about New England and how deep and dense it is. Vermont is such a character, as people always say, but these books could not take place in anywhere but Vermont. Why is that? And why did you decide that?
Well, I just love Vermont. It was always my happy place. I just think it's such a beautiful place. And I love living where the seasons are so distinct. And it's just a really great place. Vermont was one of those places, along with Texas and California, that was its own state, its own country before it became part of the United States. There, California, Texas, and Vermont. And that gives it and its people a very independent spirit, I think. And I love that about Vermont.
Well, it fits beautifully into this book. So let's talk about, but before we talk about the book, okay, so you're talking about working dogs and you're talking about search and rescue dogs. But in this book, in The Hiding Place, there is a golden retriever. What is up with the Goldens?
Well, everybody writes about golden retrievers. They have, Dave Rosenfeld writes all those fabulous books, and there's so many golden retrievers and stories. So I wasn't going to write about a golden retriever because there are already so many. But of course, I write about so many different kinds of dogs, and it did not go unnoticed that I did not write about a golden. And so my friend Jerry Johnson, who's a poet from Vermont, loves his goldens. He said, "Why are there no goldens in your book?" And I'm like, because there are too many goldens everywhere. So when I came to writing The Hiding Place, I needed a really empathetic dog. I need a very, what I call in the book, a mood ring of a dog.
Mood ring? That's great.
And so I needed a golden retriever. So I put a golden retriever in the book named Sunny, after one of Jerry's beloved goldens. And so if you love golden retrievers, you'll love Sunny. She's awesome.
Well, Sunny is a wonderful character in your book, and so pivotal in the book. And again, I keep saying it's so emotional in this book. You decided in The Hiding Place to write about a cold case. talk a little bit about, I mean, that can be a tough thing for a writer to talk about something that happened a long time ago. And you as an agent would probably tell your clients, your new clients. Druanne says, I sometimes forgot that the dogs were animals.
Oh,
You know,
thank
that's
you,
very
Drew.
sweet, Druanne. That's because they do have, I agree, such a personality. And Joanna Schaffhausen is saying, well, I think when we were talking about dogs want to please you, Joanna says, unless they're a basset hound, ask me how I know.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Joanna has a fabulous basset. And I love bassets. We had a basset when I was a kid. And there is a basset in the hiding place.
So, but no, it's not Winston. It's not Joanna's.
No. But
So anyway, and Kathleen Caputo is saying Goldens aren't really animals. So we'll have the dog talk on the chat. But so, cold case in the hiding place. It's about a cold case is one of the storylines. And you as an agent would tell your new clients, don't do cold case. What would you say and why is that? And then why did you decide to do it?
well, the trouble with the cold case is it's hard to write a cold case story without flashbacks. And flashbacks can be deadly, especially in the hands of beginning writers, because, readers sit down, they open the book, they want to go to the end of the story. And so when you have a flashback, you literally put in the story in reverse, and the reader knows that, and a lot of times they just won't tolerate it. So I'm very leery of flashbacks, and I would never have thought of doing a cold case story. But my editor, the genius Pete Wolverton, said to me, you should write a cold case story. You should do one of Mercy's, because Mercy's grandfather was a sheriff who died in the line of duty. And that's about all we know about him before this book. And he said, it would make a great thing for her to have to solve one of his cold cases. So I had this directive. So I had to figure out how to do it. And I was very, very leery about doing it. And I didn't know how to do it. So I just started reading every mystery I could find to try to look for ways that better writers than I had done it. And I always tell my clients that, and my writing students, your comps are your best teachers, right? So I finally found Attica Locke's Highway 59 series. It's a wonderful series. If you haven't read it, African-American Texas Ranger. And there were cold cases, and she did it so beautifully. And I thought, well, I can't go whole hog the way she did in her books, but I could do a smaller version of that. And I could see how she did it, and it made sense to me. So I thank Attica Locke for teaching me how to write a cold case story.
That's great. We're all rushing out. I'm sure Gibson's has that book as well that we can use as a guide, because the book doesn't feel like it happened in the past. It feels like someone in the now uncovering things of the now. And so it never feels like it's just rehashing something old. It moves ahead all the time as Mercy's finding out new things and figuring out how to find out new things. Was it fun to write? Did you outline the whole thing? Did you just go for it?
Well, I knew the backstory. I had a really strong sense of the backstory. And that was one thing I had learned from the first two books, was I'd always focused on that present storyline. In a mystery, there's two stories. There's the story you tell the reader about how the sleuth solves the crime, the investigation, right? Finding the killer, all that. And then there's the other storyline, which is the actual story of the murder, right? And so those are two different storylines. And one is the process of revealing the other. And in my previous books, I really had outlined well the current storyline, but not as much the underlying story. And so this time I had a very strong sense of what I wanted to do with the underlying story. And so I think that helped me. And I also think just because I'd written two others, it was easier for me to say, okay, I can figure this out. When I reached that point where I'm a big outliner, but when I reach the point where the outline goes astray, I fall out, then I know I can get back on track.
Yeah, that it is helpful. I wish every time I write a book, I think this time I'm going to be a grown-up. I'm going to have an outline. I'm going to do it, and then I don't, and whatever. So we all do them the way it's meant to be. And I know we sort of talked around and through your book, but have you figured out, if someone says to you in the elevator, what's your book about? Have you figured out what to say? What would you say?
Well, I would say it's a story about Mercy's grandfather, a cold case that she inherits when his deputy dies and leaves her the case files. And meanwhile, the man who killed her grandfather has escaped from prison and is after her grandmother. So she has to go through all these family secrets, solve both crimes, find the missing girl who's the cold case she's inherited, and try to save her grandmother from the man who killed her grandfather.
And also balance, then we know now, balance things in her own life that are happening in her the other part of her life, both in current times and in the past.
Right, exactly. So there's a lot going on.
No, there's a lot going on, but it feels like real life. Priya's saying, wow, I can't wait for the book to arrive, because the story relentlessly goes forward. The title, Paula, is so multi-layered. There's so many meanings to the hiding place. Tell that story too.
Okay, so when I wrote Blind Search, I had a very bad title that I can't even remember what it was, but the publisher hated it. And so my editor said, you're gonna have to come up with another title. And having been an acquisitions editor for many years and being an agent, I knew that if I didn't come up with a title they liked, they would pick something and I wouldn't like it. That's how it works, right?
Inside publishing, okay.
Yeah, that's how it goes. So I came up with a list of 100 titles that I could live with. 100 titles, yes. And I thought, okay, they'll pick something here, but I knew I could live with all of them, right? And the publisher picked Blind Search, which I thought was perfect. It was actually one of my favorite ones. It really fit the book. And then the editorial director really liked The Hiding Place. So my genius editor, Pete, said to me, okay, so your next book's going to be called The Hiding Place.
You had the title first? I
had the title first. I know. And so I had to write a book called The Hiding Place. And so I did. And I knew it had to be a cold case because he said it should be a cold case. So I had those two parameters. And that really, it's kind of helpful to have parameters. It does help, narrow your choices, because it's two big choices have been made for you already. So it turned out great for the book. But yes, it was.
I can understand it as a writer. Actually, I'm a little envious of that, because as you say, so many doors are closed. It's the title, The Hiding Place. How about a cold case? How are you going to make that good? How are you going to make that good? And as you wrote the book, there must have been days when you thought, ooh, that's another hiding place. Oh, that's an emotional hiding place. Oh, that's a physical hiding place. Oh, that's a relationship hiding place. And it just gets cooler and cooler.
Yes. I love that. That's one of the things I love about writing, and I love about revision, because revision is usually where I really layer the story and weave in all that kind of differentiation, which I think is the fun part. It's like icing the cake or decorating the house. You've done the hard work, you built the house, now you get to decorate it. It's a lot more fun.
And when you go through, I love revisions too. And when you go through after you write the book and you sort of see what the theme is, then when you revise the book, you can sort of pull the strings on that theme and make it shine all the way through. Did you have fun doing that?
Yes, I always have fun doing that. That's one of my favorite parts, actually, of the process. I love that.
Because you see what you didn't realize that you wrote.
Exactly. And it's, if you allow your subconscious free reign, your subconscious will do a lot of the work for you. It's great. And then consciously, your conscious mind sometimes takes a while to catch up with your subconscious mind. Your subconscious mind's way ahead of you, going, no, this is great. Just write that down. And you don't even know why you're doing it. But then when you go to revise, you're like, oh, that's why I did that. Good job, subconscious,
Sue Grafton used to call that the magic, how your brain is doing something that the rest of you doesn't even recognize. But in your book, you're writing with quiet hands. You talk about this. That's the sort of confidence that comes from that's sort of portrayed to the reader, when the reader knows when the reader feels, when the reader understands that the writer knows what they're doing. So how do you do that as an author? I mean, you've written so many wonderful books about how to write. Did that make it any easier for you to actually write?
Oh, I don't know if it does or not. I do think that there is an intangible feeling you get when you sit down to read your favorite writer, and right there on the front, on the very first page, in the opening lines, you get that sense that you're in good hands. Yeah. And that this is a storyteller you can trust, and he's going to take you on a good ride. I think that just takes work. I mean, it's a combination of voice and all these other things. So you just try to get that feeling, right? That you try to evoke that feeling in the reader. And if you can, that's what we're all looking for as agents. You know, we're looking for that feeling you get on the first page.
Well, but I mean, you tell that. I'm flipping through the book now, and I think I can read this without my glasses. Your first line is, "Some people take their secrets with them to the grave. Others leave them behind on their deathbeds, riddles for the survivors to solve." And that is the whole book. Those first two lines are the whole book. Did you write those first, or when?
No, I did write those first. I usually start with an opening scene in my mind, which is usually just an image. I had this image of Mercy at the deathbed of her grandfather's deputy, right? And that he was going to leave her these case files, this cold case that I was directed to write, right? This cold case mystery. And I had this image of her. I usually have an image, like when I wrote Blind Search, I had an image of a little boy lost in the woods, inspired by a true story of a little boy with autism lost in the woods. And the same thing with in A Borrowing Bones, I had this image of Mercy and Elvis marching through the Vermont wilderness, you know, grieving for Martinez. So I usually have that image, and the image evokes action, and it also evokes theme for me. It's hard for me to write until I've got that image.
Yes.
Talking to me. And
so do you wait for the universe to bring you? I mean, I know what it feels like. Juliana's saying that's powerful. It is. You know, do you wait for the universe to, I mean, you have to open yourself to the possibility, I think, that the image will present itself. You can't just look for it.
No, I don't even know, you know, how it happens, honestly. My backup plan is always lots and lots of research until, you know, sort of priming the pump, so to speak, so that there's enough there for my subconscious to work on that it will come up with that image. You know, I'm writing book 4 now, and I didn't have an image for this book. I'm like, oh, I mean, I knew it was going to take place at a wedding. I knew certain things about it, but I didn't have that opening image I need so badly. And I sat down to write what I thought was the opening image. And I wrote a completely different scene with a character I didn't know. And I loved it. And with lots of goats in it. Goats and a character who surprised me that I did not see this character coming. But I knew when I wrote it, oh, this is the opening scene. How it's going to parlay through the rest of the book, I have no idea. I'll figure that out. But I knew that was the opening scene. I had this image of this guy and these goats and a Glock, and, you know, off you go.
What do you need besides goats and a Glock? I mean, there you go. I'll read that. I'll read that. But while we're waiting for that, if you have questions for Paula, Elizabeth will be asking the questions with us. So I want you not to resist putting the questions in the Q&A. You already have a couple, or in the, exactly, thank you, Gibson's. In the chat, we'll also take those, and we have a little bit of time to do that. So, but talk about this. Here's Elizabeth. Let me ask one final. Let me say something then, because I know Elizabeth will end the session. But you all should know, all of you who are here, if you don't already know, Paula is the most generous, the most loving, the best friend that anybody could ever ask for, a guide and an advisor and a teacher, and incredibly talented, incredibly skilled, incredibly wise. And I couldn't be happier to be here tonight to talk to you with her about The Hiding Place, which is absolutely exceptional and absolutely not to be missed. And we are so thrilled that this is not the last in the series. You can read them in any order, but so just grab it. but it's much more fun to start at the very beginning, which Gibson's has all the books, and buy all the books, and then just have a Paula Munier binge because you're not going anywhere anyway. So have Gibson send you the book, and Paula will sign them. This is marvelous. Paula, happy Pub Day. Congratulations, sweetheart. It's really great.
Oh,
Elizabeth, can we do the questions?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Hank. You know, if you haven't read Hank, Hank is a goddess among us. So you should read Hank.
Thank you.
Okay, this is great. I'm having a lot of fun just listening. I kind of don't want to dive into these questions because I just want you guys to keep going, but we do have questions and I'm going to start asking. You just mentioned book 4. People were saying, is there going to be a book 4? Because you mentioned that you have a 3-book contract. So there's quite a few questions about book 4. Before starting book 4 about Mercy, did you consider leaving her and starting with another set of characters for a different trilogy?
Oh.
Well, I didn't really want to leave Mercy. Well, partly because we just gotten this Malinois pandemic puppy, and I thought now I can add all this stuff, this good stuff. And I love writing about the dogs. So I was prepared to do that if it came to that. But I was really thrilled when I got a deal for more books. So I'm happy to write book 4 and thrilled that Minotaur has signed me up to write book 4. So
because we need the goats and blocks.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm very curious to know about the goats and blocks. So Priya asks, when you write a book like The Hiding Place, where all your series characters are in their right place, how do you pull them out to write the 4th book?
Well, you know, that's the thing, right? And so what I do is, again, I follow my own advice and I read my comps. So I read all the series that I love that go on for many, many volumes. And, you know, it's so hard to keep a series fresh. And the people who manage to do it, you know, your Lee Childs and Louise Penny's and Julia Spencer Fleming and Ellie Griffiths, and, you know, all the people who do these series that go on for a long time. My friend Jane Cleland, who's on book number whatever, and Jim Ben, who writes Billy Boyle, you know, they're like on, I don't even know, they're way up there in the teens, right? And they manage to do that. So I study how they do it. And I think sometimes you just have to have big things happen. You know, you have to kind of blow up. It's just like real life where you look back and think, oh, my life was perfect at that moment in time. Everything was rocking on all cylinders. And then a pandemic hits and, you know, that's life, right? So you just have to heighten the verisimilitude because real life is never perfect for long.
That's a very good point, actually. So that's well done. Well done. You're very good at your job. So let's, we've got a question about your dogs. Priya mentions Elvis is the perfect name for Elvis. This was earlier in the event when people were saying, why would you name the dog Elvis? It's a perfect name. Don't listen to them. Since you got Blondie after the borrowing of bones, why didn't you name Blondie Elvis? And then Margaret asks, or is Blondie after Deborah Harry's band?
Yes, well, you know, actually, well, first of all, Blondie is a girl, right? So I didn't want to name her Elvis. But also, and I just thought that would be too much pressure on a puppy to, you know, because Elvis is the perfect dog. He's, as I call him in the book, the smartest dog in the world. So I don't want to put that kind of pressure on her, right? Or myself to be able to train her to be as smart as Elvis and as well-disciplined as Elvis. But we named her Blondie because if you've seen her color, and she is the color of a Belgian pale ale, blonde ale. Oh. And so that's why we named her Blondie, because she's Malinois are Belgian shepherds. So it only made sense that she'd be the color of a Belgian blonde ale. So that's why we named her Blondie. I hope that doesn't disappoint you, but your beer lovers will know that Belgian beer rocks, so.
So we have some writing questions here. Do you try to keep a schedule to divide your time between writing, agenting, promoting, etc.? How do you balance all that?
Oh, I do it so very badly. I mean, terrible. I'm so bad. It's just ridiculous how bad I am at it. I tend to write in spurts, right? When I'm on a roll. And then I just, and I, like everybody else who has a day job, I write at night, I write on weekends. I write on holidays. You know, I get on a roll, and I just try to keep going. I'll stay up really late at night. I'll get up early in the morning. You know, with the pandemic, there's nothing else to do, which that does help a little bit. But it also means that you're on call. I know all of you working from home feel the same way. We're on call 24/7. And the day that one of my clients said to me, "Oh, it's so great, you're a night owl like me," because I had emailed him like at 2 a.m. And then the same day, one of my clients said, "Oh, you're an early bird like me," because I emailed her at 6 a.m. I said, "Okay, I'm actually neither a night owl or an early bird. I like to get 8 hours of sleep minimum." So, you know, but that's just what we do, right? We do what we have to do.
Okay.
Sorry, no great tips about that.
There are no tips. There are no tips.
It's
I have new
all,
tips every day. Don't do them.
it's all just a mess and you just try and survive. Got it. Okay. Angela wants to know, how many drafts did each book take, and did it get easier with book 2 and 3 to say this is the last draft?
Well, you know, I don't get to say it's the last draft. My editor tells me when it's the last draft. And I know his tricks now, you know, because I tend to write a rough first draft. And we all know that. My editor knows it, I know it. And then he gives me great notes, and then I write. And usually what happens next is he challenges me until he challenges me with something that I think, wait a minute, I don't think he's right about that. And I make a good case. And then I've figured out now that when it comes to that point, he'll say, "Oh, we're done." He's just waiting for me to reach that point where I don't agree with him that something needs to be changed. Because as I tell my clients, you know, the editor's always right. Your editor's almost always right. So until they're not, they're right. And so I just wait for him not to be right. And I make all the other changes he suggests, because, you know, editors, they're like genius story mechanics. You know, they see what you don't. And so as an editor myself, I really honor the editor and what they contribute to the project. So I just keep rewriting until I finally reach that point where I think, no, you know, I think this works. And then I'm done.
All right. Linda wants to know, she says, the first sentence of Borrowing of Bones about grief and ghosts is so perfect for the story. Did you write it first as you began the book, or did it come later? And was that sentence hard to write?
I think it came when I knew what the story was really about. You know, sometimes you write and you don't really know what the story is really about. I know that I like to say what the story's about in that first line. I mean, as a reader, I love that. Yeah. So I try to do that in my books too. Sometimes I don't know right away what that story is really, really about. I'm writing book 4 now, and I have a first line, and I have that first scene that I really like. And yet I know that by the time I get to the end, it may change, because I may have a clearer sense. Hopefully I have a clearer sense of what the story is really about.
Sue Grafton did that. She would make her first paragraph even be what she's thinking about, that the story meant to her, and then tells it. I thought it was really a wonderful way to get readers in, and you do exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like writing a thesis statement. When you've laid out this book is about this, it's easier to absorb the rest of the story, knowing that it's all supporting that. Let's see here. We have another question. As for the cold case writing, do you think it's best to concentrate on here's what she's finding out right now going forward, rather than this is what happened back then, and not talk about what's in the past?
Well, I mean, readers grow impatient with storylines that are set in the past. They want the now story, right? They want the now. And so I focused on the now. But I have three very short flashbacks spaced throughout the book, beginning, middle, end, act 1, act 2, act 3, and that give you just a little hint of what was really happening. And that, you know, of course, Mercy doesn't know. She has to figure it out. So in a way, the reader knows what Mercy doesn't. And the fun is, hopefully, is that it's fun to watch her figure that out.
Dramatic tension. It's like watching Columbo.
Yeah.
All right. I think this might be our last question. Among your favorite books, among your 3 books, which is your favorite? Or do you have a favorite? Which is your favorite child, Paula? Like how do you pick that?
I don't pick that. I was like picking one's children. I have 3 children. I have 3 grandchildren. I could never pick my favorites. I have 3 dogs. I could never pick my favorites. I will say that the book you're working on is the one that you're most preoccupied with, right? So I love all the books, but it's book 4 that keeps me up at night now. So my mother-in-law once said to me, may she rest in peace, that the child you love the most is the one you work the hardest on. Now, I don't think that's necessarily true, because I love all my children in different ways, but all equally somehow. But I do think the book you're working on, because you're working the hardest on it right now, is the one that in some ways, if it's not your favorite, it's at least your high maintenance, right? It's your high maintenance child. So,
And also the one, every book that you write is your favorite for a different reason. You know, this was your first book. This is the one that you proved you were an author. This is the one where you learned how to do a cold case. This, you know, it's, each one has its own joy and its own specialness. So, you know, favorite why? It's
right.
a great question, but it's also a fun answer to talk about.
Yes, exactly.
So tricked you. We're gonna have one more question here because this just came in. But do you have any advice for young writers? How do they get over the fear of, if any, of working on a new project? Before you answer that, I will remind your audience at home that Hank is happily signing copies of The First to Lie, ordered through Gibson's Bookstore, and Paula's new book, The Hiding Place, is out today, and she's signing those for us as well, ordered through Gibson's. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Paula, Hank, any advice for new writers to end our event this evening?
Well, I always tell writers the best thing you can do is write and join your local writers group, whether it's your genre association or the New Hampshire League of Writers or whoever it may be. So that I think it's important for you to make friends. Like, I'm so lucky I have all these fabulous friends. All of us are writers, and who else is going to understand why you want to spend hours of your life alone making up stories about imaginary people? Normal people don't really do that. And so you need friends and colleagues, and they will become your support as you grow as a writer. So I think that's very important. You keep writing and hang out with writers.
And I also think that we're used to being in school where you write something and you hand it in and someone says A or F. But as a writer, you're just seeing what works. You can go back and you can change it and you can fix it, and there's no wrong. There's just, the only wrong is not doing it at all. And I always hate to think about people who say, oh, I can't do it. Oh, I could do that later. Oh, I'll do it when I really have a better idea. And that means you're never going to do it. So there's nothing to be lost by trying it now, see what happens. If you don't like it, do it another way. But if you are a writer, there will be nothing that will stop you from doing it. And when it's difficult, and it will be difficult, pat yourself on the back, because that means you are working on it. Because if it is too easy, then you're not working hard enough.
All right. Excellent advice. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody who joined us this evening. Your conversation in this chat sidebar has been fascinating to watch. And thank you for wonderful questions. Thank you to Hank. Thank you to Paula. Have a wonderful night, everybody. Happy book birthday, Paula.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you, Hank and Elizabeth. Thank you.
Good night.